Hi, and welcome to our next video for the urinary system. We just talked all about how urine kind of travels through the nephron and how we filter out things from the blood that we don't want to create to basically make the urine. So it's important to know that there's two types of nephrons, and they're basically just where they're located at. I think the most important thing to kind of know about nephrons is that cortical nephrons are the majority of our nephrons, and it really dips very deep down into the renal cortex. And the juxtamedullary nephrons are kind of in between the cortex and the medullary junction. I think the most important thing, though, for this is to just know that cortical junctions are our most common. So what happens when we have made all this filtrate and we've taken everything out of the blood we wanted to keep, we've taken stuff out and we've put stuff back that we want to keep, and what do we do now? What do we do with all our waste product now that it's gone through that entire nephron? Well, at the end of every nephron is what we call a collecting duct, and this collecting duct does exactly what it sounds like. It collects now the urine that has been made in that nephron, and it delivers the urine into the calyces, which are basically huge collecting ducts, which then enters into the renal pelvis, and then it's going to exit that kidney into the ureter. So if we look here, this would be your collecting duct. All right, so here is your end of your distal convoluted tubule, and you can see this would be where another nephron is connected, another nephron is connected, another nephron. So there's many nephrons connected to one collecting duct. So this collecting duct is just responsible for getting all the urine that has now been created in those multiple nephrons. So this is kind of just talking about the various capillary beds within a nephron, and we've really hit on the glomerulus already, and this is where we basically are pretty much forcing solutes out of the blood to be filtered. But then there's one called a pertubular capillary, and this is the one that's kind of wrapping all around the nephron, and this is the one that's actually going to be able to absorb solutes back from the filtrate that we actually want to keep. So urine formation in general is a result of three processes: filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. So this picture right here does a fantastic job showing you all three of those mechanisms that we use to create urine. So the first is glomerulofiltration, and this is something we've already touched on quite a bit. This is when we're literally forcing water solutes and really small items through that capillary into the nephron, into that glomerular capsule. So that's step one. We're literally pushing kind of everything out. So everything goes in. And then reabsorption is when we want to take items that, oh man, we actually do want to keep these in the body. So that could be water. You know that you release various hormones that target the kidneys that are going to be able to reabsorb water back into the blood, especially if you have like low blood pressure. We obviously want to keep glucose, that's our blood sugar, to help us create ATP energy. We want to keep amino acids to help build proteins. And then sometimes we want to keep ions that we may have flushed. So maybe we need to reabsorb salt or Na+. That's something that, well, maybe we do need to keep more of. So we'll reabsorb that back into the bloodstream. And then the last one is tubular secretion. This kind of happens throughout the nephron, and basically this is maybe something that didn't get filtered out of the glomerulus. So this can be things like excess hydrogen ions that may be making our blood too acidic. This could be excess calcium, creatinine, which is a kind of byproduct of glucose, and then other drugs or alcohol that need to be maybe filtered out. So that filtration is a passive process, meaning that it does not require energy. And the reason it doesn't require energy is because it is such high pressure through there that we're literally forcing it out into that nephron. Reabsorption, we've talked about, is including all of the things that we want to take back. So these useful substances can include water, amino acids, glucose, and then other various items that we want to make sure get back into the blood so our body can use them. Tubular reabsorption actually begins right when filtrate enters into that proximal convoluted tubule. So pretty much this is going to occur all through that nephron. It's really easy to kind of understand that the pertubular capillary bed is what's going to basically be reabsorbing all of these items. So we're really going to be focusing on that water, the ions, and the amino acids, and that pertubular capillary is what's going to be able to bring it back into our blood. We also reabsorb really small amounts of uric acid, urea, and creatinine. That can just be kind of a byproduct of us reabsorbing other items as well. That's very, very normal. So if we look, this is kind of showing you those processes a little bit more in depth. So over here, here's our Bowman's capsule and our glomerulus right there. And you can see the arrows on each of these are going to be pointing either in or out. So anytime it's going into the renal tubule, that means it's going to be becoming filtrate or becoming urine. And anything that's exiting the renal tubule is going back into the blood. And it also is color-coded for you. So if you look here, this is what we're reabsorbing back into the blood. Okay, glucose and amino acids. We want to reabsorb maybe salt. So water needs to be reabsorbed. So we really want to make sure that we are reabsorbing things that we want to keep back in the blood. And then the last one was tubular secretion. This is the opposite of tubular reabsorption. So these are things that we may want to get rid of, maybe due to a high acid content. So we know that hydrogen ions or A+, can actually make blood too acidic. So we might need to reabsorb those back into or secrete them into the renal tubule and get rid of them through urine. It's really important that we also get rid of this for maybe certain drugs. But really, I think the big thing here is it helps to really control our blood pH level. Anytime you have any excess plus ions like hydrogen or potassium, it can really screw with your blood pH. So if we look again, we can see that some of these things are being reabsorbed back into the renal tubule. So there's your hydrogen ions, there's your potassium ions, and other drugs and poisons. So now we're going to move away from how urine is made into the characteristics of urine and the other urinary organs. So urine is usually a yellow color, and that's because it's actually old destructed hemoglobin, so that molecule that gives your blood that a red color. It's sterile, meaning that it should not have any white blood cells in it or blood in general. It has a slight scent to it, and it has a pH of around 6. It has a little higher than specific gravity. That means it has stuff in it other than water. And we know it has stuff in it other than water because we just talked about all the things that you filter out of your body, like potassium and hydrogen ions. You create 1 to 1.8 liters of urine every 24 hours. And things that they test for in urine that should be there would be sodium and potassium, waste products like urea, uric acid, or creatinine, ammonia, which is actually what urea turns into. That's why once pee kind of dries or pee's been out for a little bit, it starts to get that really, really ammonia-based stench. And then bicarbonate ions, which are one of those things, once again, that's a buffer for blood pH. So when they test your urine, they should not find glucose, blood proteins, red blood cells, hemoglobin, white blood cells, or bile. If you have a UTI or you suspect you have a UTI, a urinary tract infection, they will make you go in and pee in that little cup. And what they're testing for is to see what's in your urine that basically shouldn't be. So when you have a UTI, the things that they're going to look for is really red blood cells, blood protein, and white blood cells. A lot of times when you have white blood cells in urine, that means that your immune system is trying to fight an infection in your urinary tract. So anytime we see a white blood cell group called leukocytes in urine, usually that's a sign of there is a UTI infection and you need to get on antibiotics. So the ureters. Ureters are just for transport. They don't have really a function other than transport. They're just two tubes that come out of each kidney. They're 10 to 12 inches long. They start right at that renal hilum and go all the way down to the bladder. And really, it's pretty easy. I mean, most of the time you're either sitting up or standing up, so urine's carried down by the ureters through gravity. And then also peristalsis, which is the contraction of that smooth muscle that's going to be able to force urine down and then into the bladder. So here's our ureters. They just exit the kidney, take urine down into the bladder to be stored. So the urinary bladder is basically just a muscular sac. It is there to just store urine, has no other function other than that. It's right behind your pubic symphysis, that piece of cartilage that connects your two pelvic bones. And it has 3 openings, 2 for the ureters and 1 for the urethra. The urinary bladder contains 3 layers of smooth muscle, and it has a mucous membrane that is made of transitional epithelium. And if you remember, transitional epithelium is super, super cool because it can stretch. And this is really important because we want to be able to store urine for a long amount of time. We shouldn't be going to the bathroom every 10 minutes. So this bladder can actually stretch and hold up to 2 pints of urine at one time. So here is our urinary bladder. It's pretty much just a muscular sac connected to the 2 ureters up here and then the urethra right down here. So the urethra, once again, is really just for transportation. You have 2 muscles, an internal and external urethral sphincter. The internal one is going to be involuntary and helps keep the urethra closed when urine is not being passed. And then your external urethral sphincter is what you can control. So this is when you're like, oh my gosh, I really need to go to the bathroom. You go to the bathroom and then you finally let out your urine. You're controlling that external urethral sphincter. It's very similar to your anal sphincters. You have an internal and external anal sphincter as well. The internal one is involuntary and the external one is voluntary. And that is it for the urinary system. You guys have made it. If you need to rewatch the video, please feel free. If you need to go back to video 1, please go back to video 1. But please make sure that your note guide is filled out so you are super successful in all your tasks for this lesson.